It started long before the first torpedo was fired. In the 1930s, while the world was still trying to forget the horrors of World War I, preparing for the next one. Among its hidden projects was a new kind of submarine, the U-boat, short for Unterseeboot, which means undersea boat. The men who designed them were engineers and dreamers. They saw the ocean not as a barrier, but as a weapon. When Adolf Hitler came to power, he turned that dream into something far darker. By 1939, when World War II began, Germany unleashed its U-boats into the Atlantic like wolves into a forest. Their mission was simple but deadly: starve Britain into surrender. Britain was an island that depended on supply ships from the United States and its colonies. Those ships carried food, fuel, weapons, everything needed to survive. If the U-boats could sink enough of them, Britain would collapse without a single bomb falling on London. At first, the plan worked. The U-boats struck without warning, sinking ships in the dead of night. They fired their torpedoes and vanished beneath the waves before anyone knew what happened. For the sailors aboard those merchant ships, it was pure terror. One moment they were drinking coffee, the next, fire and metal swallowed their world. You couldn't fight back, you couldn't even see the enemy. The ocean itself became a monster, hiding killers in its depths. Inside the U-boats, though, life was far from easy. The crews lived in cramped, airless tubes that stank of fuel and sweat. There was no space to stand, no privacy, no sunlight. The air was thick with carbon dioxide, the temperature swung from freezing to sweltering, and the constant fear of being found hung over every man. When they dived deep to escape a destroyer's attack, the pressure made the metal hull creak and groan like a dying beast. Every sound was a reminder that one small crack could mean the end. Their commander, Admiral Karl Dönitz, saw these submarines as Germany's best hope. He called his strategy the Wolf Pack, multiple U-boats working together to hunt convoys of ships. They attacked in the dark, coordinated through secret radio signals, hitting from every direction. By 1941, the U-boats were winning. Entire convoys disappeared. Ships burned on the horizon night after night. Britain's survival hung by a thread. But the Allies weren't helpless. They fought back with their own weapon, the destroyer. Sleek, fast, and built to kill submarines, destroyers were the eyes and ears of every convoy. They carried sonar, which sent out sound waves to detect submarines lurking below, and depth charges, barrel-shaped bombs that exploded underwater. Life aboard a destroyer was tense, exhausting, and terrifying. The crew spent every moment listening, waiting for that faint ping that meant a U-boat was near. When it came, the captain barked orders. The ship spun toward the sound, engines roaring as the crew rolled depth charges off the deck. Moments later, the sea erupted in towering columns of water. The explosions boomed deep below, and everyone held their breath, waiting to see if anything floated up, oil, wreckage, or nothing at all. But hunting submarines was like chasing ghosts. Sonar could trick you. A school of fish might sound like a submarine. A false echo could send the destroyer racing toward empty water. And all the while, the U-boats were out there, watching, waiting. The destroyers were hunters, but they were prey too. By 1942, the U-boats were striking closer and closer to home. They torpedoed ships along the American coast. Flames lit up the night sky as tankers burned offshore. The newspapers called it the second happy time for the Germans. But soon the hunters became the hunted. The Allies began turning the tide. They built faster ships, stronger convoys, and better weapons. Planes now flew long-range patrols, spotting submarines from the air. Most important of all, British codebreakers at Bletchley Park cracked the German Enigma code. They could now read U-boat messages before the submarines even left port. It was like seeing through the enemy's eyes. In April 1943, everything changed. A massive Allied convoy, ONS-5, crossed the North Atlantic. 60 merchant ships carried supplies vital to the war effort, escorted by destroyers. Beneath the waves, over 40 U-boats gathered to attack. For days, the ocean boiled with explosions and fire. Ships sank, men screamed in the water, and oil slicks stretched for miles. But the destroyers fought back with precision and fury. Aircraft swooped in to finish the job. When the smoke cleared, 7 U-boats were gone. It was the turning point of the Atlantic War. From that moment on, the U-boats were dying faster than they could be built. The Allies had radar that could detect periscope, sonar that pierced the depth, and escort carriers whose planes hunted from above. Every time a U-boat surfaced, it risked being spotted and destroyed. What was once a nightmare for the Allies became a graveyard for the Germans. Still, for the men inside those submarines, the fear never stopped. Imagine hearing the hum of propellers above, the distant rumble of depth charges exploding closer and closer. The lights flicker, pipes burst, and the pressure builds until your ears ache. You hold your breath, waiting for the next explosion to either miss or end it all. Of the 40,000 men who served on U-boats, more than 30,000 never came home. They remain at the bottom of the sea, buried in their steel coffins. The men on the destroyers carried their own scars. They watched ships vanish in fire. They pulled frozen bodies from the water. They knew that even a moment's distraction could make them the next to sink. This wasn't a war of glory. It was a war of endurance. By 1945, the U-boat threat was broken. The Allies had won the invisible war. But victory felt hollow. The sea had claimed too many. And yet, out of all that death and fear came progress. The battle between U-boats and destroyers pushed technology to new limits. Sonar, radar, communication systems, all born from desperation. It also changed how the world saw the ocean. It wasn't just a vast, empty space anymore. It was a battlefield, a place where silence could kill. Even today, the wrecks of those submarines and destroyers lie quietly on the seabed, preserved by the cold. Divers sometimes find them still upright, like sleeping giants. Cups sit on tables, charts hang on walls, as if the crew just stepped away. It's haunting, but it's also a reminder. The war beneath the waves wasn't just about ships or machines. It was about people, men fighting in darkness, clinging to courage when all hope seemed lost. It was about the fear of the unseen, the patience of the hunt, and the thin line between life and death. So when you stand by the ocean and listen to the wind, remember the men who fought there. Somewhere below the surface, their echoes remain, an eternal whisper of the invisible war beneath the waves.